Hello and welcome to Torturing Your Wife. Hi again, welcome back to Brian Reby Drives Electric, but it's also Ellie Reby has to drive electric too. And we just hit 5 years of EV ownership. So wanted to share some thoughts and get Ellie's first impressions and then answer some questions that came in from X and Facebook.
Apologies in advance if I say because I haven't looked at these questions at all. It's catching.
So before we jump in and I say a bunch of stuff, I want Ellie's hot take on what it's been like owning an EV for 5 years.
Well, it's all dependent on the timing. Like at the beginning when it was sort of novel, there were a lot of dudes just sort of looking and asking questions and little kids who got excited who had recognized it from magazines and stuff.
When you were driving the car?
When I was driving the car, yeah.
Okay.
And I work in a biomed technology, so I work with a lot of engineers, so I would get questions in the parking lot a lot from just people wondering about the day-to-day, most of all.
When I came to you at first 5 years ago, 5+ years ago now, and said, hey, I want to make this crazy change and get an EV, what were your thoughts, and then how did you feel about the process of us actually doing the purchase?
Ultimately, I got the gist of why you wanted to do it. Like, I understood the impulse and the general idea. You took care of a lot of the day-to-day details, though. Like, you set up the loan and all that stuff. I don't think I was terribly involved in that part. We just did a budgeting check up front. And I said, yeah, why don't you? That was it. Because you handled most of it.
Yeah.
Which is not how it usually works in this house.
Yeah, I had spreadsheets and all sorts of stuff with our finances, making sure it would work financially, even though we wanted to, make that next move. We own a 2008 Prius, and so once you drive that for a while and realize you don't need gas all the time, it makes you want to, me anyway, makes me want to say, why do we need it any of the time? And so that was, it seemed like the next progression. But until I test drove Model 3 in early 2018, I wasn't sure it would be right yet.
Yeah, and the reason I don't remember much of it is because you had prepped this whole set of, you had thought about all the logistics and presented them, and it was pretty easy to convince me because it was really well thought out.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So when we first got it and you were driving it to work off and on, through the winter sometimes. And that was a 2015 Model S that we bought in 2018. And it had about 53,000 miles on it. And so we drove that until 2021 when we traded it in for the new Model Y. So did you feel like there was a big learning curve for you to drive it to work and back, those first few drives with it in winter and things like that? Did you have concerns, or was it just kind of...
Not up front, no. Let's see. I only had like one really dicey drive, and that was a really extraordinary circumstance. It was home drive time, blizzard, and it took literally 3 hours for everyone to get home that day. And I think I got it down to 3%, maybe 4. That's the only time I've really skirted the line that close. And that's just because of the environmental circumstances. I think people ran out of gas on that drive too.
Yeah.
And as far as the logistics, the day-to-day, the only thing I had to get used to, and the Prius works this way to a lesser extent, is that it's pulling you, like the default is brake instead of gas. So you have to slow down by easing up instead of braking. And that's the only thing that I had to adapt that had to be a change in mindset. The rest of it was just getting used to the screen, but that didn't take very long.
Yeah, I generally tell people the door handles and the screen you get used to in about a week, making that change. Mm-hmm. So now primarily you're driving the Prius. I'm driving the Model Y. We do switch it up every now and again. You'll take the Model Y. Mm-hmm. Do you really ever think about it, or...
The decision which to drive is just always dependent upon whether I'm taking the boat out or not, or because we don't have a rack for the Model Y. I think generally if you have it plugged in, I just don't use it because I figure you're you have a schedule in your mind on it. But other than that, like I don't have any qualms. I don't have any qualms about taking it.
Like, are you comfortable, even though you primarily drive the Prius,
Yeah.
are you comfortable hopping in the Y and doing whatever you need to do?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. How do you feel about it from a space, safety, family vehicle standpoint?
Oh, in terms of the family, I've never been worried about it. I know there are specific examples when I was turning left on a left green arrow where it has saved me from crunching into somebody because somebody took the opposite turn too fast or, went when I had the right of way, and it kept me from crashing into something and made sure no one rear-ended me either. And I wouldn't have been able to compensate as fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that it has saved me from a major accident, but it's kept me from several minor ones that in my memory for sure.
We've road tripped it quite a bit.
Yep.
How have you felt, for long distance as far as comfort, as far as storage space, usability from that kind of on the road perspective?
Yeah, it's really good for that. The long range one, I know you were going back and forth on the long range option because of the price point difference, but I think in the end it was worth it. Just in terms of just the extra security there. Like, you really don't need it with the supercharger network in current state, but at the time it made sense.
Mm-hmm. And as far as comfort from, I know you've slept in the passenger seat several times. Do you feel like the seats are pretty comfortable or,
They're great. And they clean up pretty easily too, which is a consideration with the kids.
Yeah, that's you. All right, let's go to some questions from the web. First question I'm seeing is from the 5 Count, and they ask, how do you feel about Rocky 4?
How does the car feel about Rocky 4?
How do you feel about Rocky 4?
Well, I go back and forth on it. Honestly, I mean, the casting of that one guy, I understand then you don't have to pay for a stunt guy, but still, he's not great.
Dolph Lundgren?
I'm thinking of Rocky 5.
Oh,
yeah. No. Rocky 4? No, I'm all in on Rocky 4.
Okay.
I have no qualms about that at all.
I think the guy in Rocky 5 was an actual boxer.
That makes sense.
So, obviously, I love Rocky 4 too, and happy birthday, Polly.
Polly and the snow cones.
Yep.
Thanks, 5 Count.
Jim asks, how receptive was Ellie in you getting this car? EVs were not mainstream then. So I think we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
You didn't care.
You anticipated all the questions I was going to have, and they were mostly budget related.
Benjamin asks, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how fast or slow you feel the charging infrastructure in Minnesota, greater Midwest has been in these years. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, from my perspective, I'm not studying it as closely as you, but my impression is it's gotten pretty expansive in the last 3 years. What about you?
Yeah, I would say right when we got our Model S in 2018, it seemed like there were new superchargers popping up relatively frequently, but not super fast. And then it seemed to almost die. And that turned out to be kind of the transition between V2 and V3, where they were waiting to install new stations until the V3s were ready.
That makes sense.
And then we saw an explosion about the time North Dakota opened up, more stations opened in South Dakota, more stations started opening up in Minnesota and, some of the northern Minnesota areas, but not at breakneck speed. I feel like this summer there have been 4 or 5 that have opened up in Minnesota and a couple more that are under construction that are exciting. Although they're not in every place to make it perfect yet, I've been really happy with the rate of progress, especially this summer. I feel like they've really hit a stride. Now, obviously, the more spoiled we get with locations, then it'd be great to have magic docks up here. It'd be nice to have more in some of the smaller lake towns that people might vacation to. But I feel like they're doing, especially on the main thoroughfares, they're doing a great job of rolling chargers out. But could always use more. And hopefully as other brands start transitioning to NACS and using the supercharger network, we see an expansion accelerate even faster. Tessalusa asks, can't wait to hear about the early EV days for y'all and how you decided to get what you got.
That was all you. You had one picked out and ready to go. There weren't a lot of options for full electric at the time.
going back to that budgeting piece, after I drove my friend's Model 3, I thought, this is fantastic. This is the future. We got to go there. We got to go there now. Through the budgeting process, I was really torn about how much we spend and, do we do something like a Leaf or a Bolt, something that might be a little easier to slide into from a budget perspective. But then I looked at, where the chargers were, especially in 2018, and the volume of charging. I thought, well, we could do a Leaf or a Bolt or something like that, but we're going to be really restricted on where we can travel, how fast we can travel. And so those kind of, as I was talking to my friend who was kind of guiding me through some of this with his Model 3, he's like, those are great cars, but you are going to be limited on some of those things. We started looking at either a new Model 3 or a used Model S. And in hindsight, probably the better financial picture would have been to go with a Model 3 because it did get a tax break that a used Model S did not. So we probably could have saved a little money there, but the hatchback of the S was really, slick and handy on road trips and things. That was kind of the main debate of it's between new Model 3, used Model S. And so I was just kind of digging through inventory, looking for the right play or the right price and seeing what we can do. So we have managed to dodge every tax credit.
I know, I've got that tax regret look on my face right now.
Yeah, we missed the tax credit because we got the used vehicle in 2018, and then Tesla had run out of their tax credit in 2021 when we got the Y. So no credit there either. So
yeah,
we're paying full price on everything.
The converse of that is that with the changes just in the world allowing us both to work from home pretty much all the time, if we were making this decision now, it would be way more wide open. There'd be far more options that had reasonable range and that would fit our needs more easily. I mean, I was commuting 30 miles to work every day, back and forth. And we're not in that scenario now. So it'd be a very different process than it was at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also a lot more charging. CCS is still pretty tough in Minnesota. You can do it, you can travel, but it's not nearly as convenient as the supercharger network. So although there are a lot of other great EVs that I like and wouldn't mind owning, really for the kind of trips we like to do, Tesla is the easiest by far in Minnesota right now. Mm-hmm. Justin asks, what made you sell your Model S for the Model Y?
Oh, that was you pushing that.
That was me pushing that.
So I don't remember. So, maybe you were hoping to get that tax break real bad. I don't know.
No, I knew we'd miss that. That's one of those decisions that in hindsight might not have been a great timing choice. The primary reasons were the Model Y sits a little taller, has more range, newer battery technology, full self-driving capability, debatable at this point, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And just kind of a step up into a vehicle that could be upgraded. The 2015 Model S, although I really loved it, it didn't have navigation built in, so all of our trip planning had to be done online, and then, just kind of...
That's sort of an unusual feature to have turned off, but the previous owner did that.
Yeah, they just didn't buy that feature. And at the time, we were told you wouldn't be able to upgrade our computer to one that would get navigation. About a month or two after we sold the Model S, they did allow that upgrade.
Yeah.
And then we would have had, maps built into that computer or navigation built into that computer. So, and it was also right before used car prices started going up dramatically.
Yeah.
So we kind of just fell right in that pocket. Hindsight being 2020, we probably would have kept that car for another 6 months.
Yep.
Upgraded the computer and maybe just lived with that and held on to our Y reservation for longer because there's nothing wrong with the vehicle. We still liked it. It charged a little slower, didn't have quite the range, but it was really nice and I thought looked fantastic, even with the old nose cone.
Yeah. It met our needs easily.
Yep.
In your defense, though, of the timing, that was when we made that decision to go on the list. It was when Joan was a bit younger, and there were some mobility concerns about making it easier for her to put her in the car because she was getting bigger and still having trouble setting herself up in a back seat. So that was a bigger concern than it is now. I mean, she's climbing in her own car seat these days, but we didn't know when, if that was going to happen at the time.
Yeah, so it just made like form function made sense to make the change at some point, but we probably could have held on and made that change later. But
plus we were on the wait list and it was sort of a hot spot and it came up earlier than anticipated. The projected.
Right. Yeah, we were originally going to get the rear-wheel drive Model Y, and then they said they weren't going to build that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if I can change if they're not going to build that, and I can change my order to a all-wheel drive or, dual motor and keep my FSD price, then I'll make the change. And they said, yeah, we can do that. And then within a week, we had a car.
Yep.
So, and then eventually I think they did make the rear-wheel drive.
We rolled with the changes and didn't really put up a fight. So we made a decision that we had to make quickly. Worked out fine.
Yeah, we could have been more patient, but we weren't.
Yep.
And now we know we could have been more patient. But still love the S. If I had to go back to a used S right now, or even a new S, but a used S, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it's great.
Recliner 256S, what is it and how many miles? So we've kind of answered that. Yeah, the Model S was a 2015 80D. Then we traded it in 2021 for the long-range Model Y. And miles, we put about 55,000, I think, on the Model S. And we just crossed 67,000 miles before we go on another road trip starting Tuesday, which will add more miles to the Model Y. So in total, about 120,000 miles on EVs.
What's the range of the models comparatively, in case that's what they're talking about? Because it's sort of open-ended.
The range of the Model S, I think, was 285.
That sounds right.
And the rated, and then the range of the Model Y is 330. Haven't got that much range out of either of them. We did get over 200 on a trip, about 210 on a trip in the Model S. It's been a while since I've really pushed the Model Y, but generally highway speeds and things, I would say 240, 250 if we really pushed it end to end. And then, driving slower, you could probably get more out of it, but that's about where that lands. Sorry if you're hearing rain. We tried to get this set up before it started raining. Robert asks, would you consider yourselves early adopters, and how long before you see EVs becoming mainstream? Go for it.
I think that's a great question, but the answer varies based on region. I think for us, we could be considered early adopters. Like Southern California, no. Here in the Twin Cities area, it's already happening. Just based on how many times you're waving at people. Like, he waves whenever he sees another Tesla on the road, and sometimes if he sees a full electric, like we saw that new Hyundai just yesterday.
Yep.
So he's doing that a lot in the last 2 months. So just based on that, it's getting there, at least in the Twin Cities area. When you go beyond, like when you take your trip this week, I think you're going to have a better answer on how the Dakotas are situated comparatively. I'm guessing it's going to be different.
Yeah, true.
You're in oil country, so.
I would say we're late early adopters. That would be by the time I joined the Minnesota Tesla Owners Group and the Minnesota EV Owners Group, there were plenty of people in those groups. It was, small and pretty close knit, but there were still plenty of people there. I felt like I was already joining a pretty substantial group, and I was surprised by that. So I wouldn't, there are definitely people here who, had their vehicles in, 2012 or whatever, and so I would say those are the early adopters. My thought on when EVs will be mainstream, when we bought our car and I realized how good it was and how capable, and we did our first few road trips, I thought EVs would be heavy mainstream like getting heavily into the mainstream by now. We did have a couple years of pandemic in there, and other auto manufacturers were slower to adopt than I expected they would be. I thought we would see people, especially with all the announcements that happened in the 20 teens, people saying by 2020 they're going to have a couple really great EVs, and those timelines just kept slipping. I'm surprised that things hadn't gone faster before then. And then the pandemic slowed things down, then supply chain issues and things. And that slowed other companies, that slowed Tesla down too. We're just now getting close to the Cybertruck that was unveiled in 2019.
Yep.
And it's still not on the roads yet. That kind of just ground the gears kind of to a halt. Now I'm thinking by 2025, if you're the average consumer, I would expect you would be at least test driving some EVs when you make your next vehicle purchase. By 2027, I think that will be very mainstream, that an EV would be your first test drive choice, and then only buying gas at that point if you absolutely need it for your situation. I think things got pushed back a few years, unfortunately, but I feel like it's still happening, just not in the gung-ho way I wished it would have.
Yeah.
So that's all our questions from X/Twitter. And we didn't really get questions on the other platforms, some likes, some comments, but no questions. So I guess my next question for you is, when the Prius eventually dies, it's a 2008.
I will be sad.
We will be sad.
I'll be sad.
No, I like it too. It's been a trooper, and I loved driving it back when I did. But when the Prius dies, my assumption is we're going to go all electric. Are you feeling that way too?
Yeah.
Any hesitation about that, or?
No. In terms of options, it's so much wider. Like there's so many now that our needs have changed. When the Prius dies, we'll be able to get close to exactly what we need instead of this tiny amount of range and this huge amount of range. Mm-hmm. And there's a broader variety that we will be able to pick something that exactly meets our needs and is the least amount of money we can spend. The options were not as open the last time we made this decision.
Yeah, that's a good point. There still is the Leaf and Bolt option, which our Bolt has a good amount of range, but a used Leaf, if we decided we just wanted something around town, would easily handle that, and then we'd just take the Y for longer trips. But it is nice to have a second vehicle that can travel a bit. So something like a Bolt or the Nero or the Kona or ID4.
I wouldn't say no to an ID4, honestly. I think they're adorable.
Yeah, those are options depending on, like you said, we can choose more by price and how much range we want to have, rather than be concerned of, we need the biggest range no matter what the cost. That is a positive. And once everybody's on the same connector, that will also be a big strategic advantage of, really hitting that sweet spot with our vehicle choice.
Yeah.
I know you don't really use the FSD. You've done some videos on it. You use autopilot on the highway. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that suite, that progress? Let's just touch on that. This doesn't have to be an FSD video, but
yeah. Well, ultimately, it's something you have to get in the habit of doing, and I'm just not. It's not a matter of fear. It's just a matter of, I'm used to not doing it, so I don't. And at this point, I've actually forgotten how to engage it again, so I've just not picked it back up.
Riding with me, do you find it annoying when I have it on?
Only lately, because it's throwing us in turn lanes inappropriately, since the last update. Before that, not really.
But it was expensive. We did spend $7,000 on it. I think now we would probably choose to do the subscription instead, because it stays with the vehicle now. And if something were to happen, if we were getting into an accident, we'd have to rebuy or resubscribe. I wouldn't at this point pay $15,000 for it, as much as I want to help the technology progress for the overall safety of the roads.
Yeah. Well, I understand how it's important, but again, I'm trying to think of any other scenario where you're part of a beta group and you're paying them.
Yeah.
Like, what other technology works that way?
Yeah.
I guess it's just exciting enough that, enough people want to do it.
Yeah, and I've said this on other videos, but for me, I would like Joan to have some autonomy as she grows up.
Yeah.
And driving might not be an option, but maybe, riding as an individual, with responsible parties on either end might be an option for her and give her some more autonomy. So I like helping in the beta sense.
Yeah, and we don't know how far that's going to go or how fast it will progress. But even if it doesn't help Joan specifically in the next 5 years, help somebody else.
Right, yeah. It's not all selfish. It's just mostly selfish.
Yeah. Well, it's a car.
I mean, my overall thought is I love it. It's a little bit of a life change. You do have to adjust to it, but really once you do, it's like when your workplace gets new software and everybody grumbles, even though the new software is going to be better and can do a lot of things that your current software can't. Mm-hmm. Everybody grumbles, everybody hates change. We're all used to going to the gas station. But then after you learn it, you realize all the new capabilities you have, all the new things you can do, how much smoother and easier it is. But there's that learning curve. And switching to an EV is a little bit similar, where you might have some stumbles, or your first charging session might not be great, or it might be a little confusing getting the outlet or charge station in your home. But those are things that happen with any big change. And once you learn it and get used to it, you don't even think about it. And really, if I wasn't doing YouTube, it would just be my car and I wouldn't think about it. I go days and days without even knowing what my state of charge is, just because I know it's going to work. Even if I don't plug in at night, especially in the summer, I'll go a few days and go, oh yeah, maybe I should plug in. It's not something that sits on your mind like you assume it's going to before you switch. I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I agree with what you said about the learning curve. Like we adapted really quickly, and there's nothing special about how adaptable we are. So it wasn't hard to do. And finally, I'm just looking back on the bills, like what we've been paying for the cars, over the past 5 years now. If you've been hesitant about a Tesla specifically because of the price points, and you last looked 3 years ago, look again, because it's different. It's a lot more reasonable than it was even 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like there's been a lot of adjustment going on in that industry, and it might not be out of reach if you haven't checked into it recently.
Speaking of that, I did want to ask you about our electricity bill, because we just had a NEMA 1450 plug put in our garage, and we've been using the mobile connector that we had with the cars to plug in, just in case we wanted to switch brands. We didn't want to get locked into the Tesla wall connector and then have to use adapters or things. So we did that. It's on a separate meter through our electric company. And so I think on our bill, it's also broken out.
Yep.
And so have we seen a major devastating extra charges when you factor in we're not paying for gas in there?
No, when you factor not paying for gas, if your house is completely electric, then you'll be able to absorb the cost. Especially, well, around here anyway, like it's $3.60 or something per gallon.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's 380 now.
See, that's how little I have to keep track of it now.
Yeah. And then I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying is you just get in new habits. You don't pay attention to it, and you just live your life with an EV instead of a gas car, and it's pretty simple. I think that's it.
I think so.
But we are about to take off on a road trip, just Joan and I. We're going to drive up through North Dakota, see the sights up there, go down and see Devil's Tower through the Badlands, and then come back. So an exciting week next week. That'll be coming up soon on the channel. So thanks for watching. Have a great day. Thank you, Ellie, for your patience and in all things. And we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Happy road tripping. Bye.